This week, I'm showing you how to make my favorite cozy meal. It's mushroom ragu with polenta, and it starts off with, you've guessed it, a lot of mushrooms. I've got some dried porcini, some plain button mushrooms, and then a mix of wild mushrooms, which most importantly needs to feature oyster mushroom. And I'm gonna start off by hydrating the porcini with some boiling water and leaving that to sit while I prep everything else. So starting with cleaning the mushrooms, the easiest way to do this is to use a dry sponge and to rub off any dirt or residues that you can see and just go over each mushroom. It doesn't take as long as it looks. It's quite easy, and it's best to use a dry, clean sponge because you don't want to introduce too much moisture into those mushrooms. Then with the oyster mushrooms, we're just going to tear them up very roughly into little filaments because this will give the ragu a meat-like texture. So the same way that meat kind of falls apart into those filaments, that's what we want to get with those oyster mushrooms. So very roughly tear them up, and then with the shiitake, the button mushrooms, any kind of round mushrooms that you have, just quarter them into some nice bite-sized pieces. Then onto the prep of our sofrito mix, or mirepoix in French. We've got some red onions, carrots and celery. Going to peel the skin off all of those because we're leaving the celery in and eating it. It's best to peel it so that it doesn't have all those cellulose strings. And then for the rest, it's just a case of dicing them. So slice them into julienne and then dice them up as small as you can. Take your time with this, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Then onto the fun bit, opening a nice bottle of red wine. It's always good to use decent red wine, stuff you are happy to have a drink of, because you will taste the difference in the stew. So first up, putting the mushrooms in dry into the saucepan and letting them sweat off all of their moisture. At that point, going in with some oil, and that's when we're going to bring some color onto the mushrooms. So let them take on a little bit of color, obviously try not to burn them, so on a medium heat. And once they've colored nicely, that's when we can go in with our sofrito. So the celery, onions and carrots go in and they sweat off for 5 minutes on a lower heat. Make sure to salt the sofrito at this stage so we can season every layer of the ragu. Then once all of that is sweated off, go in with the aromatics, so crushed garlic, some thyme, and then going to deglaze the pan, so all those caramelized mushroom bits on the bottom of the pan, lift them off with the red wine. Feel free to have a little drink while that simmers away and we burn off some of the alcohol. Then we can go in with our tinned tomatoes, wash the tin out with some of that porcini water, and then finally pour in the porcini water and the rehydrated mushrooms into that. Stir it all in and then leave it to simmer for really as long as you have. I had a bit of parmesan rind left over, so I put that in there, but that's optional. It just adds a bit more umami and depth of flavor if you have it. So that's all. And then simmer it for at least an hour, but if possible longer, and just keep an eye on it to make sure that it doesn't start to brown and that you still have enough water in there. And then we can get on to our polenta. So at the last minute, just going to cook that according to pack instructions. I like to go for half water, half milk when rehydrating the polenta. Stir that over a simmer and it will thicken up nicely. And then it really depends if you like it to solidify or if you like it creamy as to how much extra milk or cream you want to add in. I wanted it quite hard, so I followed the pack instructions in terms of the amount of water to put in, and then added a bit of parmesan, a bit of butter, and just stirred that in and then plated it up. But at this point you can see that it's going to stiffen and become hard. If you want it to be a creamy polenta, then just add more milk and cream. And then that's it, just plate it up, top it off with the ragu, and you can use this ragu in pasta as well the next day, or just freeze it to have on hand. And that's it, a lovely warming cozy meal full of umami and lovely textures.